A quick note before today's video to let you know that the first 3 episodes of the Sojourn audio drama are now permanently free to listen to on their YouTube channel. Check it out in the links in the description and pinned comment below. Despite its amazing introduction to the setting, I feel like Star Trek's Miranda Class has a bit of a reputation for exploding. That's certainly what the team here at Spacedock think of it, and there's also plenty of you that think that too. But is this true? Was the Miranda actually a bad ship? We're gonna dig into things to see on this week's video. The first, best, and most important Miranda class is of course USS Reliant, the part-time antagonist vessel of Wrath of Khan. He and his fellow augments hijacked the poor ship and used it as part of his revenge plot against Kirk. Khan attacked the Enterprise with the Reliant, where she went toe-to-toe in 2 engagements, but it was ultimately crippled when Khan was outsmarted, and the ship ended up being destroyed. Also in Picard Season 2, we actually see a plaque about the Reliant, putting its launch in 2264. So right off the bat, we learned some good things about the Miranda. It held its own in battle, it looks pretty damn cool, and we have the earliest confirmed date for its existence. Chalk one up for the Miranda. USS Saratoga briefly reuses the Reliant model in the voyage home. It's the first ship to encounter the whale probe, where it is temporarily disabled but not destroyed.
Remember.
That's the 2 early birds of the class, but if we go all CSI on the charts on the Bozeman, which is technically a Soyuz class and thus forbidden from inclusion in this discussion, the USS Lantry is there. Since the forbidden ship is from 2278, that date becomes the earliest assignment for any Miranda. The Lantry itself does also turn up 87 in-universe years later in 2365, where it is scuttled by the Enterprise, since it's carrying an incurable aging disease. Except they find a cure for it in the episode. Nothing to see here, don't look behind the curtain. Also showing up in a TNG episode was USS Brattain, which was stuck in a weird space thingy, which caused all its crew to die, but the ship itself survived, so nothing bad for the Miranda class here. A whole bunch of them show up in Deep Space Nine, starting out with a different USS Saratoga. This one was the ship that Sisko and his family were aboard during the Battle of Wolf 359, which saw it utterly destroyed by the Borg. It's hard to really blame the ship here, since the Borg wiped out every single vessel it faced in that battle. Next up is the trio of USS Trial, USS Late, and an unnamed but numbered Miranda, which popped up all throughout DS9 doing all sorts of things. They patrolled around the station itself, did escort duties, and even took part in Operation Return, and all 3 seemingly survived the entire Dominion War. What's neat about these 3 is that they're all made from a commercially available model kit of the Reliant, which is why their names and numbers are all anagrams and numbergrams of that ship. Is numbergram a real term? Speaking of Operation Return, a number of Mirandas were part of the massive fleet tasked with retaking the Bajoran wormhole. One of these is only known as NCC 31720, which we don't see explode. That's good. But USS Majestic and USS Sitak both got obliterated, which is bad. They both saw very violent deaths as they escorted the Defiant through the battle, and this couple of very obvious defeats is almost certainly where the idea that Mirandas are throwaway pieces of junk comes from. DS9 sees a few more Mirandas show up, like the USS Antares, which is just a background thing alongside what seems like copies of itself to pad numbers. We've no idea what happened to these ships, but none of them go kablooey on screen, so that's another plus for the Miranda. USS Tiananmen first popped up on a chart in a TNG episode, but had an actual appearance as a CG model in DS9 at the first Battle of Chintoka, along with 2 of its siblings, USS Nautilus and USS Shirkar. The first 2 actually managed to make it out of the battle, but the third was sadly destroyed by a Cardassian weapons platform. 2 out of 3 surviving isn't bad though, is it? There are some more identifiable Mirandas seen in lower decks, but they're not real, so we can't use them in our analysis, so I mention them only for completeness. The first is USS Macduff from one of Mariner's holodeck programs, and the others are brief, alternate reality versions of the USS Cerritos. Let's put all those Mirandas into a nice table to see how things shook out. And look at that! Out of 15 real ones, 6 of them were shown being destroyed. And of those, I think only 4 can actually be truly attributed to loss in battle, and all of them were in Deep Space Nine. So going by this data, I'd say the problem isn't that Mirandas are dangerous, fragile vessels. No, it was the gigantic war that saw many vessels destroyed. So what about unidentifiable background Mirandas, like those copies crews of USS Antares. There's a lot of them around. How do they fare? Well, there's one disabled in Spacedock by the whale probe, 2 are decommissioned awaiting scrapping, 1 helps out the Enterprise crew at the end of Generations, 2 are there at the Battle of Sector 001, but we don't directly see their fate, so that's a toss-up. Deep Space Nine saw tons of them. 3 were in a task force, the Second Fleet had many, and many more were chilling out at Starbase 375, and more were in a huge Operation Return Fleet. And there's another at DS9 along with our anagram trio in the wedding episode. There's a number of unknowns that took part in the 2 battles of Chintoka, and there we actually see one of them be destroyed, which is the only time that happens to any unidentified Miranda. After that, there's some in the final battle of the show, and then some also appear at the very last episode of Voyager to meet the opening transwarp aperture. So out of all those ships, only one has hard confirmation that it was destroyed. Now yes, there's plenty that could have also met that fate fighting the Borg and Dominion, but we don't see it, so we don't know. It's also very possible some of those unknowns are also the same ship seen multiple times. If we put that data together with the known ships, I can't help but think that Mirandas aren't bad at all. In fact, a quick look through Memory Alpha shows that Excelsiors blew up just as much, if not more. Not to mention how many runabouts DS9 sent to an early grave. All this info does reveal a few more notable things about the Miranda class. The ones seen in Endgame put the latest date for seeing them in service at 2378, which is 114 years after the earliest date from the Reliant launch. That is one long career for a spacecraft design. But we can go even further. Not only do we know the class as a whole lasted at least 114 years in service, but there's also one ship that is even older than that. USS Saratoga. Do you remember that one? It's actually right here at the Athon Prime Fleet Museum in Picard Season 3 as the stand-in for Sisko's Saratoga. Since we see the museum in 2401, that puts 115 years between this ship's first and last appearances. We don't know how long the Saratoga was around before it met the whale probe, so its lifetime was actually even longer than that. But we also don't know how long it's been at the museum for, or if it had spent any time mothballed in the intervening time. But there is at least a chance that this first Saratoga served for a century. How does a ship design last that long? Well, clearly this thing was an absolute workhorse if Starfleet kept building more of them, and it seems like they did up until the early TNG period if the registry numbers mean what I think they do. From that period to the end of Voyager isn't really that long, and we know the interiors were updated if the Lantries Bridge is anything to go by. Of course, we really know that that's a Battle Bridge set redress, and that Miranda's showed up a lot because it's recognisable and there were plenty of models of it around to use. But coming up with in-universe reasons for its long career is fun, and looking more in depth at it has certainly given me a new appreciation for the thing. It's far from the explodey flying coffin its reputation kinda says it is. Sure, it was great for its time, but it seems like it remained pretty good throughout its entire service life, and wasn't really any worse than anything else. You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate, fighter, and carrier design reference books, as well as 1 week early access to upcoming videos. Thanks to our supporters, and thank you for watching.